achieve that, we need to make them more resilient and sustainable. Resilience determines how robust food systems are to changing conditions and external shocks. It is an interplay of social, ecologic, and economic aspects. Food system resilience is defined according to 13 indicators that range from diversity and connectivity to reflection, shared learning, and economic profitability. Since we can only achieve resilience systematically, any missing component weakens it. Based on a comprehensive analysis of scientific studies and 2 case studies in Kenya and Senegal, our report shows how agroecology, as defined by FAO's 10 elements, strengthens resilience and supports a low emissions pathway. The results show that 3 components stand out in agroecology's resilience-enhancing potential. It promotes diversity of landscapes, of animals and plants, and of practices. Agroecology also builds healthy and fertile soils, for instance, by closing natural resource cycles, ensuring synergies between plants and animals, and reducing the need for pesticide use. It puts people and knowledge at the centre and focuses on local solutions, integrating traditions and heritage and strengthening farmers' networks. The evidence is clear. Agroecology can contribute significantly to climate-proofing our food systems. But it can only succeed when all stakeholders also understand the relevance of the socio-economic dimension and value it accordingly. Our report underscores the existing potential for a climate-resilient transformation of the food system based on agroecology principles. Let's make change happen together.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the 5th dialogue on agroecology and agrobiodiversity, hosted by the Intersectoral Forum on Agroecology and Agrobiodiversity. Today, we mainly look at agroecology at the UN conventions and agencies and what is in for actors in Kenya. So before we begin, we'll do a short icebreaker, which I'll shortly share on the screen. So you can check on the chat. We've shared a link for icebreaker. So before we begin, kindly click on the link shared on the chat. So the icebreaker that you look at is what comes into your mind when you think of the UN conventions and agencies. So you can kindly click on the link that we shared on the chat, but at the same time on your browser, whether you're using a mobile phone or that will input will be 621 653 621 653. So kindly click on the link shared on the chat. Click on the link, just input, just go to your mobile browser, then you input the code shared on the screen. So we have one person. When you think of the UN convention and agencies, what you normally think about is negotiations. So far, we have feedback from 2 people. Anytime they think of UN conventions and agencies, they think about negotiations. So kindly click on the link that we've shared on the chat. And if you're not able to click on the link, you're also free to go to your browser, whether it's your mobile browser or your laptop. Then on the browser, you can type slido.com. Then when you ask for a code, the code that you'll input will be 621-653. So we also have declarations. Anytime when you think of the UN conventions and agencies, you think of declarations. There's dialogue, agreements. We also have country positions. Then you're also free to add more than one entry. So even if you've already added, you're free again to add another entry. So lobbying, we have declarations, bureaucracy, treaties, the conference of party meetings. So what comes into your mind when you think of the UN conventions and agencies? We have policymakers, we have declarations, we have agreements, we have petitions, we have dialogues, we have negotiations, we have governments, we have the UN food systems, country positions, and you can see majority are saying lobbying. Anytime when you think of the UN conventions and agencies, you think about lobbying. Technical staff, very technical staff, the UNCCC, the UN food systems, the negotiations, agreements, dialogues. So you are still free to add, but now I think we'll proceed. So my name is Bob Aston. I'll be your moderator for today's session. So this dialogue is organized by the Intersectoral Forum on Agroecology and Agrobiodiversity, ISFA. Today we look at the agroecology at the UN conventions and agencies and what is in for actors in Kenya. So I'd like first to introduce our speaker for today. Will be Martin Herren. Martin is the program manager, policy and advocacy at the BioVision Foundation. He joined the policy and advocacy team at BioVision in 2015 and co-implemented the Changing Course in Global Agriculture program by promoting evidence-based policy planning, agroecology, and multi-stakeholder platforms at the CFS in Rome, as well as on the ministerial levels in Kenya. In the project, Martin is assessing the potential of agroecology to hedge against climate change impacts, and is furthermore involved in the promotion and dissemination of agroecology policies and strategies at national and county levels in Kenya. Before joining BioVision, he worked as a senior project leader in consulting the Swiss Federal Office for the Environment, among other actors, on climate policies and mechanisms. Before this, he was also acting as a sustainability analyst in the financial sector, research assistance, and also he also worked at the Greenpeace, Switzerland, among others. He has a first degree in geography, environmental systems, and also political sciences. And he also has an MSc in environmental policy, focusing on climate change and environmental governance. Martin, I'd like to take this chance to welcome you to proceed kindly. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Bob. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for giving the chance to be part of this afternoon today for this hopefully interesting dialogue with all of you. And let me just right away share my screen with you. So I hope you can see it. So, well, thank you, Bob, for this introduction. Much appreciated. So not much to add here. My vision actually has helped to set up the ISFA platform in past, and we've been engaged in other activities, to set up platforms and policy dialogues like this, also on national and international level. And from this activity, somehow we came to the topic that we discussed today, which to some of you might feel a little bit like worlds apart. We've seen it right now in this word cloud that some people say, oh, it's a bureaucratic thing, it's about lobbying. And even if you look at the next slide, let's see if it works. Can you see my slides? Oh, here we go. Well, that's what typically people think about when we talk about UN conventions, negotiations, UN agencies, like this little bit bureaucratic cold rooms where they talk about topics that actually happen very far away in the field and should possibly somehow impact them positively or add value to improve situations there. And these worlds apart might be true, but I'm happy to discuss with you what you think, whether this really is the case or not. So we will take stock of where agroecology and agrobiodiversity actually stand at these UN conventions and with the UN agencies. And we will also discuss, what opportunities might arise from all these discussions and paperworks and tools that come out of this international level for stakeholders in Kenya, and perhaps even vice versa. So the objective of today's dialogue, in my view at least, would be to increase your awareness of the work that is currently being done at the international level. Also to highlight some current and future relevant policy processes. There's quite a lot going on right at the moment and next month. And also flesh out some opportunities for you that you might not have yet on your radar. Well, why is this actually relevant? I think there are quite a lot of policy studies being done about agroecology, also about agrobiodiversity in the past 1 or 2 years, specifically in Kenya. Why is agroecology perhaps not picked up yet as it might or could be? What is the case with decision makers? Where are triggering points? What are perhaps negative aspects that need to be addressed? And from all of these policy analysis, I think it came quite clearly that agroecology is still a blind spot in Kenya. All members and participants today quite know what agroecology and agrobiodiversity is, and they work on the topic. But to many other decision makers and stakeholders, agroecology is still a very little known concept. And it also competes with other concepts that might have been around for quite a while and also might cause some confusion. They also claim that they need more evidence that agroecology really works, and also ask for some policy alignment with this approach with already existing policies. And of course, we often hear that there's lack of funding to roll out the approach. So there's need for more evidence, recognition, and legitimacy, and funding, which is nothing new. But what we thought is, well, perhaps agroecology might see some legitimacy and some funding and evidence on international levels already that might also trigger interest and recognition of the potential of agroecology in Kenya, if there is like an exchange or a trickle down of this information to the relevant stakeholders. So this is what we are going to discuss today. And well, when we talk about the international momentum for agroecology, agrobiodiversity at the moment, I would like to pick out the ones that you see here, because, well, there are many more, of course, but those have stuck out in the past years to some degree. From the UN agencies, we have a short look at what FAO is doing in IFAD, and particularly on the UN conventions. I'll just give you a summary on the Committee of World Food Security that has its plenary this October, the UN Food Summit that is just around the corner next week, the Convention on Biodiversity, and the one on climate change which both have their conference of parties and very important meetings both this year still. So this all happens in the next 3 months and might trigger quite some momentum that could also be relevant for your work that you're doing. So let me start with FAO, which actually has been a game changer 3 or 4 years ago to actually streamline agroecology. So they did quite comprehensive fora on agroecology on each continent in 2017 and 18. They collected information and tried to streamline the movement and also translate the rather complex approach of agroecology into this a bit tangible 10 elements approach that you see here, what agroecology really is. And I think this helped a lot of actors to communicate about the approach, what it is, and to convince stakeholders that might be critical about it. After that, FAO also developed a huge knowledge hub about the topic, collecting information from all around the world that you can browse, and also take tools like this tool for agroecology performance evaluation, which is a topic that will always come up. Oh, how can we actually measure positive and negative impacts from agroecology measures? This all runs under the Scaling Up initiative that Emma from FAO last springtime, I think, presented here in the context of this farm. So what does that mean actually for actors in Kenya? How could they profit from these activities? And first, perhaps I have to say, this is all FAO in the headquarters, collaborating with some of the regional office doing this work. This is not specifically like FAO in Kenya. So when I come back to these 3 aspects that are still lacking with stakeholders in Kenya when it comes to evidence, legitimacy, and finance. On evidence, well, you've seen this mainstreaming of agroecology, translating a complex thing into some tangible examples, like these 10 elements. This might be of use for you as well to when you talk to other actors about what it is and to explain to them. Also, the knowledge hub, I think, is really a great pool of information for any evidence that your partners might require on any aspects of agroecology. You can browse through this. Perhaps there is some good reference. There's training coming up. I just heard there's a massive open online course by FAO on agroecology. And also there's guidance that you might use. The Scaling Up initiative also aims to work together with countries directly. They do so with India, Mexico, and Senegal, for example. So if there is any need from coming out from Kenya, I could imagine that the FAO also would be interested to work together with the Kenyan government or stakeholders in Kenya, do some sensitization work, networking alliances, etc. I have to say, though, I think the funding and capacity of the Scaling Up initiative, at least, is limited still. This might change in the future, we will see. And also, but I'm happy to hear your experiences also, you know, FAO Kenya has seemed to be limited involved in whenever it comes to agroecology, and perhaps this is something that could be also changed, but needs to be kept in mind. The next actor I would just touch upon briefly is IFAD. It has been part of the discussion from the beginning in 2017 or so, but rather hesitant to engage publicly. However, recently, or just this week actually, IFAD released their stocktake report on agroecology in IFAD operations. Quite an interesting read. Have a look at that. It came out clearly that from IFAD portfolio, still a small portion of projects actually is based on agroecological principles, and also not the bulk part of money is going into that type of projects. But still, it shows that there is room for improvement. And one nice message that came out from the report, for example, is also that agroecology projects outperformed non-agroecological projects according to their performance criteria that we checked. But the main and most important information is perhaps that IFAD aims to strongly increase its investments in projects that support the development of agroecological projects or frameworks or policies in the future. So what does that mean for actors in Kenya? I think not only with IFAD, but also UNEP and UNDP did some projects that are agroecology based, and there might be good evidence and experience from these projects that you could learn from. On the legitimacy side, I think, again, if IFAD and the other UN agencies talk to their partner countries, they could sensitize them about the approach and the relevance of it. And of course, with IFAD at least, there's a clear funding aspect. It might lead to increased funding for agroecology-based projects or agrobiodiversity-based projects, but also to develop like a business model, which often countries ask for. There needs to be a business model that works behind it. And I think IFAD committed to work on that. I also listed UNEP and UNDP, just briefly, like UNEP is in the making of a agroecology strategy for UNEP, for example. So you see there are other actors also working on that. So let me move on a bit faster. And come actually to these conventions and platforms that exist on UN level that might be also relevant for agroecology in Kenya. And I would like to start with this one, Committee on World Food Security. Not very well known to any one of you, perhaps. I'm not sure. It's this committee, it's an international committee. There are negotiations going on. It develops and endorses policy recommendations and guidance. And so they just did for agroecology, and this is going to be endorsed in this October. Have a look at these recommendations. I would say they are quite useful also when you talk county or national level with government partners or other partners that you have. There's also a scientific report underlying these recommendations. It's done very thorough. I'm not going into detail through all these recommendations, but they recommend a state or country build policy foundations that are required to scale up agroecology, and other approaches also to have proper evaluation metrics in place. Also, resilience, diversity, integration, knowledge, cornerstones of a rollout approach for agroecology, indeed. But also, if you look into details of the report, there are even very tangible and more detailed aspects discussed there, how this could then actually be implemented. So it's not shallow. So what does that mean for Kenya actors? Well, on the evidence side, if anyone asks you again for more evidence, this HLP report is certainly very rich on that side. Regarding the legitimacy that agroecology needs, well, the CFS recommendations is basically an internationally negotiated text and endorsed also by Kenya. And it technically should also be considered by the national governments. So you could do in your advocacy work or refer to these recommendations because they have some legitimacy also in Kenya. But however, they are non-binding and there are no funding implications. And this is at least the case as of now. I say as of now because let me come to the next momentum, which is the UN Food System Summit that is taking place next week. And I'm not sure how aware you are of that. It's been a 2 years process. It's a global conference, all states together and discuss the transformation of the food system. And the outcome, well, will probably be in the first place just a statement by the UN Secretary General, but more importantly also they will build some coalitions that take up the outcomes of the summit and make sure that this actually is then implemented what they discussed at this summit. And one of the coalitions that is currently being developed is on agroecology, and that might be interesting also for Kenya. So you see here the goals of this coalition, and the very first goal is exactly to implement actually these recommendations by this Committee of Security. So there's the link, and it could actually give a boost to these recommendations and some more leverage as well. And you see the other goals here. I will come back to them in a second. The coalition has been already joined by a couple of countries, and I just learned this morning that also the African Union joined this coalition. Amongst others, you have the Democratic Republic of Congo, Senegal, Morocco, Burkina Faso, Mali, I think 15, 16 countries in total, but also organizations like UNDP, WFI, UNEP, and some larger donors from the philanthropic side like IKEA or Global Alliance for Future Food, although they are not confirmed yet. So what does that mean for Kenya stakeholders? Well, I think there's quite some momentum in case Kenya would join this coalition as well. There are efforts being done at the moment to do so. Agricology has crystallized as one of the game-changing solutions proposed under the Food Systems Summit. There's quite a lot of evidence in there. Have a look. You find all this information online. And the coalition itself would also support research programs in Kenya on agroecology or agrobiodiversity. That's on the evidence aspect. And well, obviously on the legitimacy and relevance, if agroecology is promoted under the UN Food Systems Summit, this gives quite some momentum for agroecology itself. And within that coalition, it could really become a reference vehicle for these agroecology recommendations. And it's a great platform for partnerships among countries to learn from each other and accelerate program development. They could also trigger finance because within this coalition, there will be also some donor actors that want to increase their investment in this approach. So let me speed up and come to an end with the two official conventions. You also mentioned that in the Word Cloud, the CBD Convention on Biodiversity and one on Climate. I'm not going into details there. It's just, the objective of the CBD is the conservation of biological diversity. The current state doesn't look too bad. It doesn't look too good. Actually, none of the 20 targets are currently achieved. Agriculture is still a main driver of biodiversity loss. And so they currently developed this post-2020 global biodiversity framework. This is also a negotiated text. In these negotiations and discussions, agroecology again has been mentioned quite often as an important approach to when it comes to biodiversity conservation. And an open-ended working group even mentioned that 100% of areas under agriculture should be sustainably managed through the application of agroecology approaches, for example. And there's also quite some scientific backing here. So again, for Kenya stakeholders, I think there's quite a broad knowledge source under the CBD developing that you can refer to, particularly at the interface between agroecology and agrobiodiversity. If you need arguments or examples or case studies, have a look there. And on the legitimacy, again, if it's mentioned in the new framework of the CBD, it certainly gets a greater stance also for Kenya stakeholders to be aware of agroecology should play a role in there. So finally, the UNFCCC, Agricology and Climate Change. Again, there's this big conference coming up in November in Glasgow. There is a technical group discussing agriculture. It's called the Coronivia Joint Work on Agriculture. In the past 5 years or 4 years now, they had 6 rounds of technical workshops. I'm not going through all of them. Quite a rich body of information and submissions from countries. And agroecology again was highlighted various times in there. However, Kenya's submission has been quite reluctant and been explicit about agroecology or biodiversity. However, the NDC, the National Determined Contributions, or the climate promise by Kenya, it leaves some room open to under sustainable agriculture to include their agroecology principles. So what does that mean for Kenya stakeholders? Again, this rich body of information to have evidence or question about the potential of agroecology. There's also the special report on land that explicitly refers to agroecology as an important means for adaptation. And well, it really depends at the COP in December and November. whether agroecology will be part of these discussions there, this is not clear, to be honest. However, there is a group of friends on agroecology and these nationally determined contributions. Kenya could join this group just to engage and exchange about the topic. And well, on the funding, I just heard yesterday, well, there's the Green Climate Fund, and they will increase their food system and agriculture portfolios significantly. So perhaps this could also lead to more funding for agroecology. But this is quite open. So I wrap up. Sorry if this took me a while. With some key message. So on the aspect of can the international level provide evidence that is useful for Kenya member stakeholders? I think so. There is quite a good degree of evidence and experience about the potential limitations of agroecology, all available online that can be used. However, as we all know, it's a jungle. There's a lot of reading to do. Sometimes you look for very specific things and you just can't find them. So there is somebody needs to do some more work for summarizing the information there and perhaps even formulating Kenyan specific recommendations. This could be something that ISFA members might want to do. On the increasing recognition of legitimacy in Kenya, well, at the UN level, in strategies, policies, it's there, it's present, it's mentioned. So this could trigger also some interest by Kenya stakeholders. However, you would need to advocate for that and coordinate work amongst each other to trigger this interest by government or other actors to become more active and engaged. Finally, on the funding side, well, the current trend and statements by some stakeholders or actors allow to be cautiously optimistic that there will be some more support in the future. However, this needs to bundle the proactive engagement with the support actors here in Kenya, and that's not easy to do, obviously. If you want to approach IFAD or so, typically it also goes through the government, so you first need to have the government on your side. Okay, sorry I talked a lot. I close here. It was perhaps quite a lot of information, but I'm really looking forward to the discussions and your thoughts, your reactions, perhaps also your experience. Is it needed at all to have inputs coming from these international negotiated level, or is agroecology just really purely localized approach? Information from that. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Martin, for your presentation on the UN agencies, UN conventions and agencies. I think for all of us, we've learned more on issues around Committee on World Food Security, the UN Food Summit, the climate change conventions, and also the Convention on Biological Diversity. So we'll kindly welcome anyone with a comment. You can kindly post on the chat. So kindly feel free to post your comments on the chat. At the same time, we also encourage you to tweet. We have shared the hashtag on the chat, it's Agroecology and Agrobiodiversity dialogues. We've shared on the chat, so kindly feel free to tweet. But at the same time, in case you have a comment, you are free to share your comment through the chat. And also, you're also free to raise your hand. Then you can be able to unmute you, so that you can be able to contribute. So share your either question or input on the chat. At the same time, you're also free to raise your hand, then we'll be able to unmute you. So anyone with any comment or feedback? Then at the same time, there's a question that Martin has posed on how all the dynamics and agroecology related work that is currently happening at the UN level could be better taken up and used in Kenya on national or subnational levels. So in case you also want to contribute on that, kindly raise your hand, then you can be able to unmute you, but you can also be able to share your questions on the chat. So Martin, there's a question from Paul. Paul is asking, how can youth be involved in the food security and safety? How can youth be involved in the food security and safety?
Good afternoon to you. How are you? Siku mingi sana.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Paul, for this question. Well, there are different pathways. Perhaps you heard of Yalta, that is a a movement currently active also in Kenya, looking at youth and its engagement in this entire discussion on agroecology, agrobiodiversity. And they had quite a lot of activities last year on this. I think they also toured through all the counties in Kenya with a bus and so on. So that was one opportunity to jump on and raise awareness about the important role that youth has in this context. There is also a chance to engage on international level. For example, they are, at the CFS, at the Committee of Food Security, there is a mechanism for civil society, and also youth is quite an important aspect there. It's called the CSM, civil society mechanism. And technically any youth NGO or perhaps even individual person can sign up to this mechanism and be part of the discussions and contribute with inputs, experiences from the ground into this mechanism. And this then again will be taken up in the broader negotiations at the committee. Obviously also through alliances at the CBD and the Climate Convention. There's the Climate Action Network or the CLARA Alliance Group, which is almost an alliance of NGOs or sometimes individuals that work on that topic, where you as a youth representative could engage there and just literally go to the website. There's always a contact form you can send an email to, and also browse through their information they have on the website already to become engaged more actively. So those would be perhaps the most direct entry points on that level. Obviously, then you could also engage more through, there are like video challenges or let's say, I don't know, they look for good examples from you from the ground at FAO and IFAD. I remember they had these challenges coming up that you can submit your inputs to. So there are a broad variety of ways to engage.
Thank you for that, Martin. So the floor is open to anyone who has an input or a question. You are free to raise your hand. They'll be able to unmute you. Then also use the chat box. You can post your question or input on the chat box. So let's give this chance to Gashora. Kindly proceed.
Thank you very much. I have followed Martin quite some bit, although I lost some of his contribution. I think at some point the line was breaking. But we have quite a number of actors at the grassroots who have taken up agroecology for the sustainable ways that it can help in food production for our people. And of course, for the cost-cutting measures that are obvious when our people apply the agroecological practices in food production. And of course, I can also see from Martin's presentation that it's a lot of engagement at the UN levels, international levels. But I think there is something lost in between the two. And especially when it comes to the national frameworks. The point at which we need to have policy documents and policy support for agroecology at the grassroots. I think we need some more discussions there, some, I don't know, more advocacy at that level. And also, when you talk about the evidence aspect of it, there is so much that is happening on the ground. Maybe we do not have as much documentation, but there comes a challenge when the people, the practitioners want to share their information and have it documented at reference level. Just to give an example, which I work for, the Resources-Oriented Development Initiative, working with other partners, proven use of fertilizer is very helpful. We have also tested it on coffee and tested it, in which we invited the Kenya, the Tea Institute, Kenya Tea Institute, as well as the Kenya Agricultural and Livestock Research Organization. And the idea was that they would look at what the farmers are presenting and their stories, and consider taking this up as an area of research. Now, the response was for them to take it up, then we have to consider funding the research. We have to consider doing a proposal and see how much we are going to raise towards the research. And I wondered, then how are we really going to help pick up what the good that is happening on the ground? So much information, and yet the authorities that are supposed and mandated to carry out research do not have the money. Where do we go from there? There is a disconnect between the evidence available and the channels through which that evidence can actually reach the higher bodies and to inform the policy level. So I get lost when I think about that disconnect. Thank you.
Thank you for your input. I can see Anne is muted. I don't know if she has something to add. Anne Beria.
Hello.
Yes, kindly proceed.
Yes, I have already posted a question concerning the availability of funds and assistance to groups in Kenya that can lead to sustainable development through sharing of traditional knowledge in farming.
Okay. Well, thank you for that question. Then we also have Mwikamba Kaibui.
Thank you, Chair. I've also posted, and thank you for the good presentation. But also posted a question on the impact of biotechnology and the so-called biodegradation. What impact do they have on agroecology and agrobiodiversity, especially noting that there's a lot of technology taking place, and how is it going to affect, or what impact does it have? Thank you.
Thank you for that. So before I hand it back to Martin, I'll just read maybe 2 comments from the chat from Hannah. So Hannah is saying, in regards to question on how to engage youth, I can add that what youth needs is capacity on agroecology business potential. We have to link agriculture, sustainability, and income. And the good thing is agroecology is offering these opportunities. We also need to show the youth opportunities in various value chains. So that's from Anne Gikamba. Then Nancy has said Kenya through ISFA, that's the Intersectoral Forum for Agroecology and Agrobiodiversity, is in the process of profiling agroecology and agrobiodiversity work in Kenya. I believe these fact sheets are critical in showcasing Kenya's work. Then there's one more question now. This from Charles. Charles is saying now that the African Union is planning on discussion and probably adoption of GM food as means to food systems and stem hunger in Africa. What is being done to influence policy at that level? So Martin.
Thank you. Quite a lot of questions, and also encourage other members here to, as a dialogue, just perhaps they have better answers. To the first input, which I liked a lot, really, which is really important. You said something is lost sometimes between this international level and local levels. I couldn't agree more. You mentioned the example with evidence sharing. Nancy already highlighted that in the comment. So, for example, instead of having research institutions from national level doing specific project on agroecology more, could do this, try to collect as much information that really comes from the local ground. Interested actors like research does not always need to go this scientific top-down approach, but I think, you know, even by which we had a study analyzing how much funding is going into agroecology research support and in conventional agriculture research. Yeah, the funds are minimal. Should increase a lot. You might have seen that this is also a topic of the coalition at this UN summit to increase research on agroecology and also provide more funding for stakeholders at that level. And this includes also to improve communication channels for evidence that comes from the field that might not be, you know, collected as strictly as through a scientific approach by a research institute, which doesn't matter. I think at this point where we are, particularly in Kenya, it's really to bring together all the actors and information we have so far and then consolidate that into a good picture that is convincing enough that other actors in Kenya also jump on that train. Then there was another question on how the groups can be engaged more, I think, by Anne. Is there a way in which groups in Kenya can be assisted in sensitization programs in traditional knowledge and security that can lead to sustainable development? Well, hard to say, to be honest. Perhaps other actors are more aware of such ways in Kenya. Just what I know is like BioVision runs a program in Kakamega Forest on such approaches, but these are just individual projects by some NGOs or CSOs or grassroots organizations. To be honest, it's lacking an overview there. So there again, ISPA could, you know, have something like a ongoing project database where you can exactly look for an answer of such a question, but I'm sorry, I can't give much help there. In addition, then Charles, you came up with, I think, oh no, there was a question on technology and that a lot of technology is currently being pushed in the agriculture sector and what impact does that have on agroecology? Difficult to answer. I would say agroecology per se does not, like, you know, unfriendly of technology approaches. Like, you know, if you think of using drones, for example, or dosage. So I mean, this might be contested, I say, but still, it's there might be some overlap. Only look at traditional approaches in agroecological farming, but also are open to some new technology approaches. So I would look here actually at, are there any benefits? Are there any synergies that you can use with technology? And well, the other move on industrializing the sector in Kenya to get more productivity, well, this is just the typical how do you say, narrative of other actors that in our experience, it's not worthwhile actually to battle with them, but rather come up with alternative solutions that might work as well. And on the GM food aspect at the AU level, I have to say there I don't have information to give a proper answer. I mean, I just found it the AU now joined this coalition on agroecology. And we often see that also with FAO and others, they pursue different pathways at the same time. each other, but let's go with the positive dynamics in our view at least, and try to scale them up, use them the best we can. Thanks.
Thank you for the feedback. So we want to dialogue a bit. Oh, there's someone has I can see a raised hand, but before that, we want to dialogue a bit on how can all the dynamics and agroecology related work that is currently happening at the UN level, how can it be better taken up and used in Kenya, both at the national or subnational level? So maybe you can spend maybe the next 7 minutes just talking about a bit on how all the dynamics and agroecology related work that is currently happening at the UN level, how it can be better taken up and used at the national and also the subnational level. But before that, you can see we have Wanjiru, and there's also someone from BioVision. Then there's also a question posted on the chat from Martin, from Dr. Martin Oulu. Thanks Martin for a wonderful presentation. Are there international discussions to establish a parallel intergovernmental panel on climate change like panel to replace the Committee on World Food Security? So that's from Martin. Then maybe we'll give this opportunity to Anjiro to ask a question. Then BioVision.
Thank you, moderator. And thank you, Martin, for a very enlightening presentation, particularly showing us what is happening at the global discourse around agroecology. It's very empowering to know that there's this much happening there, even though at our national levels, it may not seem so much. But I want to throw a spanner into the box because I find that the promotion of agroecology appears to be mainly in developing countries. There seems to be a lot of movement, and I stand corrected, to promote agroecology. And don't get me wrong, I'm a great promoter and believer in agroecology, but it appears that there's more pressure to adapt agroecology in third world countries of Africa and South America. But when you look at what's happening particularly in Europe, there's promotion of what I would call more structured agroecological processes like organic farming. And so I wonder why the divergence. I know we need to promote agroecology not only for food safety, not food security, but also for food safety and also for healthy soils. But I find that there seems to be more pressure in developing countries rather than developed countries. Then my next question, which is lined up with that, and this is a challenge, how, particularly in urban areas where we expect most of many people in developing countries to live in the future, how will agroecological products be marketed? If we think about organic products, there's a clear organic quality assurance mechanism where there are standards. Now, the converse is not true for agroecology. And we know that there could be a lot of, for lack of a better word, fraud. People saying that they've grown their products agroecologically and there's no mechanism to prove that they are. What do you think about this? Because I see a challenge ahead in terms of quality assurance of agroecological products vis-a-vis of products like organic products that have got a clear quality assurance mechanism. And so I would like to hear your insights or thoughts around these issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Anjiro, for that. So I'll hand over back to Martin. So there are two questions. There's feedback, what Wanjiru has said, and also there's a question also from Dr. Martin Oulu on whether there are international discussions to establish a parallel intergovernmental panel on climate change, like panel, to replace the Committee on World Food Security. Then after Martin has answered the two questions, at least we'll get one person who can be able to contribute on what we've just posted on the chat. How can all the dynamics and agroecology related work that is currently happening at the UN level, how could it be better taken up and used in Kenya or national or subnational level? So hopefully we can have one person who can be able to just talk a bit on that, maybe in the next 2 minutes. So back to you, Martin.
Thank you, Bob. I'm going to be quick on question by Martin. Yes and no. So the question is not entirely correct, and there are discussions to have something like this IPCC, but not to replace the CFS, but it would be to replace the HLPE, so the scientific body of the CFS. And these discussions have been floating around, but they are not done on an official channel as far as I know. And recently it also said that this has been refused by many actors and that it will not be an option. But in between, we always here and there again hear some information that these discussions are not dead yet. So there are still some discussions about having this parallel panel. But you can imagine many countries that have been supporting the CFS for years, and the HLPE see the HLPE as the scientific body, and no need to create another body there. But we will see after the Food Summit what really comes out there. And thank you very much for your great questions. Very important things you highlight there. And I think it's as a puzzle as it is in developing countries. It's the same in the developed world. But first of all, I could not agree more that agroecology is not a topic for developing countries only. It's a key aspect for every country, but also in Europe, you have very diverging movements. There are some countries like France, but also Switzerland, Denmark, that really take the approach up and want to implement it thoroughly also within the country. And also BioVision does quite a lot of sensitization work about it, and political work in Switzerland itself, for example, among other NGOs. However, as you are right, at EU level, on the fork discussions, agroecology approaches have been watered down a lot. And indeed, there are very different dynamics that are not very much in support of agroecology still. So also developed countries have to do their work. And the same thing, in the US, there is a movement called regenerative agriculture that's picking up quite a lot. But it's always David against Goliath at this point. But we hope to change, not only in developing countries, but all over the world, of course. But you're right. It might seem, because also these voices are sometimes louder coming from the developed world on agroecology. So there's still a lot of sensitization work still needed. The second aspect on the marketing of products. If you ask me personally, I don't see there is an option to have a label for agroecology. As you mentioned, it's far too complex concept and too many aspects. It's hard to pack into quantifiable and measurable labels. I would rather say we look at on the producer side. Perhaps there could be some business models developed, that provide enough income for farmers through just better production and ecosystem services or so on, that they don't have to put into the price addition of their products. What I can tell you is I see there are quite a lot of actors looking at impact investment for mid-size and small businesses to just enable them to increase their agroecology-based business approach that they have. And I'm sure this will increase. Even BioVision will look at this topic as of next year. So rather go along these lines compared to having a label or a consumer-driven approach. But probably we there have to look more on facilitate and enable the production situation of farmers so that they have enough income even if they switch to agroecology-based approach.
Yeah, thank you for that. I can see we have 1 minute, but I can see there's still a hand up. Peter, maybe in the next 1 minute. And as we hear from Peter, we have we've posted a link on the chat. So kindly click on that link on how do you plan to use the information that you have learned on UN conventions, and agencies to support your work in Kenya. So kindly click on the link on the chat. But if you're not able to click on the link, just go to your browser, type slido.com. Then when you ask for a code, you'll input 621653. So click on the link on the chat, or just go to your browser, then type slido.com, then input 621653. Peter, maybe in the next 1 minute.
Thank you very much. As you've been told, I'm Peter Njadi. I was trying to answer on the question they posted, that how can all the dynamics and agroecological related work that is currently happening at the UN level be better taken up and used in Kenya on national and subnational level. I do believe that one of the main challenges, because like for my case, I'm one of a member of some youth group. So we are trying also to bring on board some youths to understand that it's not only the white collar job that can really assist someone, but at least you are able to undertake some other things like farming that involve agroecological. That is whereby we're not really using these fertilizers that may end up bleaching our soil and water vine. Hence, the biggest problem may be we have minimum training. Hence, if we can get some more funding to at least be able to do the training up to the grassroots level, I think at least we are able now to have that increase of food basket when it comes to the world. Secondly, I think we also need to at least channel, that is, we can be able, the UN can be able now to take, that is, involve the government, like the Kenyan government. Like currently the government was trying to come up with at least some hubs, that is technological hubs in each and every sub county in the country. Hence, if the UN people can come in and at least work with the government of Kenya, at least our youth can be able to get more diverse training, and hence they're able also to do the research. And I think with that, they're able at least to be able to be part and parcel of this, and we'll be able to get so many youth on board and other people so that at least we can continue that way. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Peter, for your input. I think it's 2 minutes past time. So how do you plan to use the information that you have learned on UN conventions and agencies to support your work in Kenya? Work with government to build more diverse training, inform my colleagues at workplace, inform and mainstream messages with farmers, advocate for more youth participation at the UN conventions and agencies, improve of agroecology and biodiversity policy advocacy strategies. You can still add your input. So you are still free to add your input, and because you are out of time, I think we'll conclude. So these have been our 5th agroecology and agrobiodiversity dialogue. On 29th, we would like to welcome you to our 29th dialogue, which will be our 6th dialogue, where we will look at strengthening agroecology, social component in theory and practice. So in the next 2 weeks, on 29th September from 2:30 to 3:30, we hope you can still join us during our 6th dialogue. ISFA is planning to conduct 11 dialogues this year. So far, today is the 5th dialogue. So the 6th dialogue will look at strengthening agroecology, a social component in theory and practice. So hopefully you'll be able to join us during our 6th dialogue. Then in case for those who are requesting for the presentation, we'll be able to share the presentation, and at the same time, the recording will also be available through the ISFA YouTube channel and also our Facebook page. So I thank you all for joining us today for our 5th ISFA dialogue on agroecology and agrobiodiversity. We hope you'll be able to join us again during our 6th dialogue. Thank you all, and may God bless you. Patrick. Apologies, we finished before I can see you addressed your hand. Apologies for that. Time was not on our side.